The gentle hum of medical equipment filled the sterile white halls of the Venn Medical Institute. Lily stood quietly in the corner of the treatment room, her pale blue skin almost blending with the wall behind her. Her large, silvery eyes remained fixed on the floor as her superior, Head Medical Officer Reed, demonstrated a procedure to the other apprentices. Reed's voice carried the typical Venn monotone, devoid of any warmth or inflection. Observe the precision required for this technique. He moved his long, slender fingers across the patient's arm, connecting medical sensors with practiced efficiency. Lily knew she should focus solely on the technical aspects of the demonstration, but her mind wandered. Unlike her fellow Venn, she struggled with their society's complete suppression of emotions. Every day felt like wearing a mask that grew heavier and heavier. Apprentice Lily, Reed's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Since you appear distracted, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the proper sensor placement. Her heart beat faster as she stepped forward. The other apprentices watched with their characteristic blank expressions, but she knew they were judging her every move. Lily's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the sensors. Incorrect, Reed stated before she even touched the patient. Your approach angle is off by 2.3 degrees. This level of imprecision is unacceptable. He turned to the others. Notice her physical response. The trembling indicates emotional interference. This is why we must maintain absolute control at all times. Lily felt heat rising in her cheeks, a shameful display of emotion she couldn't quite suppress. The other apprentices took notes on their data pads, documenting her failure. This was the third time this week Reed had singled her out. During the evening meal period, Lily sat alone in the facility's nutrition center. The other apprentices gathered in their usual groups, discussing medical procedures and facility protocols with perfect composure. She picked at her nutrient cube, remembering how Reed had submitted another negative evaluation of her performance. Your continued display of emotional responses makes you unsuitable for advanced medical training, he had said. If this pattern persists, we may need to consider reconditioning. The word reconditioning sent a chill through her body. Everyone knew what happened in the reconditioning chambers, though nobody ever spoke of it. Those who emerged were perfect Venn, emotionless, efficient, and completely hollow inside. Later that night, in the privacy of her small quarters, Lily stood before her reflection panel. Her antenna drooped slightly, another sign of emotional distress she needed to control. She practiced the breathing exercises taught to all young Venn, trying to achieve the perfect blank expression expected of her people. But as she stared at her reflection, a single tear rolled down her cheek, a severe violation of Venn behavioral standards. She quickly wiped it away, horrified at her weakness. In her 17 cycles of life, she had never felt so alone, so trapped by the rigid expectations of her society. She opened her personal data pad, looking at her steadily declining performance ratings. Each evaluation noted her concerning emotional tendencies and insufficient control. At this rate, reconditioning wasn't just a threat, it was becoming inevitable. Lily walked to her window, looking out at the 3 moons that hung in the purple sky of her homeworld. Somewhere out there, beyond the sterile walls of the Institute and the emotional prison of Venn society, she imagined there might be a different way to live. But escape was impossible. No Venn had ever successfully left the system. Their society was built on perfect order, perfect control, and perfect compliance. Any deviation was corrected swiftly and thoroughly. As she prepared for her sleep cycle, Lily made one more attempt to lock away her feelings, to become the perfect Venn she was expected to be. Yet deep inside, in a place she dared not acknowledge, a small spark of defiance remained alive, waiting for a chance to grow into something more. She didn't know it yet, but that chance would arrive sooner than she imagined, in a way she could never have predicted. The night shift at the medical facility was usually quiet, but this evening was different. A massive storm raged outside, violet lightning splitting the sky as all 3 moons disappeared behind thick clouds. Lily was organizing medical supplies when the facility's alarms suddenly blared to life. Unidentified vessel entering atmosphere. The automated system announced. Crash trajectory detected. Emergency protocols activated. Through the reinforced windows, Lily watched as a burning object cut through the storm clouds. The ship, clearly damaged, left a trail of fire across the purple sky before disappearing behind the mountains near the facility. Moments later, the ground shook with the impact. Head Medical Officer Reed's voice came through the facility's communication system. All emergency response units deploy immediately. Apprentice Lily, remain at your post and prepare the trauma unit. Her heart raced as she readied the medical bay, laying out the standard equipment for treating crash victims. She had never handled an emergency like this before, but her training took over, helping her maintain at least the appearance of Ven composure. The emergency teams returned within the hour. They brought in only one survivor, a creature Lily had never seen before. Its skin was a pale pink, with dark hair on top of its head. The being was unconscious and badly injured, with burns across its body and multiple fractures. Human male, Reed announced as they transferred the patient to the medical bed. Species classification: primitive. Estimated age: adult. Multiple critical injuries. He turned to Lily. Apprentice, monitor the specimen while we consult the cynobiology database. Alert us to any changes in its condition. Left alone with the human, Lily found herself studying his features with growing fascination. Unlike the smooth, hairless faces of the Ven, his face had interesting textures: stubble on his chin, eyebrows, even small creases around his eyes. His chest rose and fell with breathing that seemed unusually rapid compared to Ven respiratory patterns. Suddenly, the human's eyes fluttered open. They were blue, a shade Lily had never seen before. He looked around in confusion, then focused on her. To her complete shock, he smiled. "Hey there," he said weakly, then grimaced in pain. "I'm Tom. Please tell me my ship's navigation system didn't completely mess up and land me in the wrong system." Lily froze. She should call for Reed immediately. Speaking with the specimen wasn't protocol, but something in the human's open, friendly expression made her hesitate. "You're in the Ven system," she replied quietly, surprised that their languages were compatible. "Your ship crashed during the storm. You're at a medical facility." Tom tried to nod but winced. "Well, that explains why everything hurts. Thank you for helping me." His voice was warm, carrying emotional tones that made Lily's antenna twitch with interest. Before she could respond, Reed returned with two senior medical officers. They immediately began examining Tom, speaking about him as if he weren't conscious or capable of understanding them. "Primitive cardiovascular system," one noted. "Evidence of emotional responses even in a severely injured state. Fascinating specimen." Tom's friendly expression changed to one of annoyance. "You know I can hear you, right? And primitive seems a bit harsh. We humans managed to build ships capable of interstellar travel." The medical officers ignored his comments, continuing their clinical observations. But Lily noticed something that disturbed her: the way they were discussing various tests they could perform while treating his injuries. She had seen that look before, when they found particularly interesting research subjects. As her superiors discussed their plans, Tom caught her eye again and winked, a gesture she didn't understand but found strangely comforting. In that moment, something shifted inside her. For the first time, she was meeting someone who openly showed emotions, who spoke his mind without fear. What she didn't realize was that this crashed human wasn't just going to be her first alien patient. He was about to become her first real friend, and the key to a freedom she had never dared to dream about. The night shift became Lily's favorite time at the medical facility. While other staff members processed reports and maintained equipment, she was assigned to monitor the human patient's recovery. Tom was awake more often now, his wounds healing steadily despite what Reed called his primitive physiology. "You know what I miss most about Earth?" Tom whispered one night, keeping his voice low to avoid attracting attention. "Pizza. It's this food with cheese and tomatoes. And, well, I guess those don't mean anything to you. But trust me, It's amazing. Lily checked his vital signs while he talked, fascinated by how freely he expressed himself. We're not supposed to discuss non-medical topics, she reminded him, but couldn't help adding, what does amazing feel like? Tom's face softened with understanding. It's like when something makes you so happy that you can't help but smile. Don't the Ven feel happiness? We feel, Lily admitted, glancing nervously at the door, but we're taught to suppress it. Emotions are seen as primitive, dangerous. They interfere with logical thinking. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, Tom said. He reached out and gently touched her hand, a gesture that made her antenna stand straight up in surprise. Emotions don't make us weak, Lily. They make us stronger. They help us connect with others, drive us to achieve impossible things. Over the next few nights, Tom told her stories about Earth and human culture. He described concerts where thousands gathered to experience music together, festivals filled with laughter and dancing, and families who shared not just living spaces, but love and support. Yesterday, Lily said one evening, checking that they were truly alone, I smiled while organizing supplies. Officer Reed saw me and submitted a negative report. He says I'm showing signs of emotional contamination. Tom frowned. They're monitoring you because of me, aren't they? Lily nodded, her antenna drooping slightly. They think prolonged exposure to your species might be affecting my emotional control. They're not wrong. She managed a small smile, something she now did more often when alone with Tom. What happens if they decide you're too contaminated? Tom asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Reconditioning, Lily whispered. They change you. Remove the parts of your mind that feel too much. Everyone who comes back is different. Perfect. Empty. Tom's heart monitor spiked with what Lily now recognized as anger. That's not going to happen to you, he said firmly. I won't let it. Their conversation was interrupted by footsteps in the corridor. Lily quickly stepped away from Tom's bed and began adjusting his medical monitors with practiced efficiency. Officer Reed entered, his emotionless eyes taking in the scene. Apprentice Lily, he said, your extended contact with the human specimen appears to be having a detrimental effect on your performance. Tomorrow, you will be reassigned to laboratory duties. But sir, Lily protested, then immediately regretted showing concern. The patient still requires constant monitoring. Another apprentice will take over, Reed stated, one with stronger emotional control. You are dismissed for the night. As Lily left the room, she heard Tom speaking to Reed. You know, where I come from, treating people like robots is considered pretty primitive. She hurried down the corridor, but not before hearing Reed's cold response. Fortunately, specimen, we don't particularly care how things are done in your primitive society. In her quarters that night, Lily couldn't sleep. Tom's stories had awakened something in her, a longing for a life where she could feel freely, express herself openly, maybe even laugh out loud like he did. But now they were being separated, and she knew it was only a matter of time before her superiors decided she needed reconditioning. What she didn't know was that Tom had already begun forming a plan. The human might be considered primitive by Ven standards, but he had something they consistently underestimated: the emotional drive to help a friend in need, no matter the cost. Lily's hands shook as she read the official notice on her datapad. Her reassignment to laboratory duties had been just the beginning. Now, after a series of concerning behavioral reports, she was scheduled for reconditioning in 3 days. The sterile halls of the facility felt colder than ever as she made her way to the medical storage room. She had one last night shift to complete before her new assignment began. The thought of never seeing Tom again made her chest tight with an emotion she now knew was sadness. When she entered the storage room, she found a small piece of paper hidden between supply containers, something she had never seen before in their fully digital facility. On it was a message written in Tom's messy handwriting. Coming to find you. Midnight. Be ready. Her antenna twitched with anxiety as she quickly destroyed the paper. Tom was supposed to be confined to his medical bed. If he was caught moving around the facility, the hours crept by slowly. At precisely midnight, she heard a soft tapping on the storage room door. Tom stood there, still wearing his medical gown, his healing injuries visible but no longer critical. "We need to get you out of here," he whispered urgently. "I overheard the officers talking. Do you know what reconditioning really is?" Lily shook her head. "They don't just suppress emotions. They erase memories, personality, everything that makes someone unique. It's like," he struggled for words, "like formatting a computer. And they're planning to do it to you because of me." "But escape is impossible," Lily protested, even as hope flickered in her chest. "The facility is completely secure, and even if we got out, where would I go?" Tom grinned. "Remember when they took my damaged pilot's beacon? I managed to fix it during physical therapy sessions. Been sending encrypted messages to the human fleet. They're nearby, monitoring this sector. If we can get to the roof." Their conversation was cut short by the sound of approaching footsteps. To Lily's horror, she recognized Officer Reed's distinctive stride. "Quick," she whispered, pushing Tom into a supply closet. She had barely closed the door when Reed entered. "Apprentice Lily," he said, his voice carrying an unusual edge. "Your presence in the storage facility is not scheduled at this time." "I was doing final inventory before my reassignment," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. Reed's eyes narrowed. "Curious. Our monitors detected the human specimen's life signs in this vicinity, yet he should be confined to the medical ward." "The monitors must be malfunctioning," Lily suggested. "I've been here alone." Indeed. Reed moved to a wall panel and pressed several buttons. Security doors slid shut, sealing the room. "Perhaps we should accelerate your reconditioning schedule. Clearly, the human's influence has corrupted you more deeply than we estimated." Lily backed away as Reed advanced toward her. For the first time in her life, she felt something new, not just fear, but anger. Anger at the way she'd been treated, at the thought of having her mind erased, at the emotionless prisoner society had become. Before Reed could reach her, the supply closet burst open. Tom emerged, wielding a medical scanner like a weapon. "You know what's really primitive?" he said, stepping between Reed and Lily. "A society so afraid of feelings that they'd rather break people than let them be human." "Well, not human exactly in your case, but you get the point." Reed reached for his communication device, but Lily moved faster than she ever had before. She grabbed a sedative injector from a nearby tray and pressed it against Reed's neck. The officer collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. "I just assaulted a superior," Lily whispered, shocked at her own actions. "There's no going back now." Tom took her hand. "Good. Sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right. Now, about that escape plan." As facility alarms began to blare, Lily felt something she never experienced before: exhilaration. She was terrified, yes, but also more alive than she'd ever been. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd made the right choice. Tom squeezed her hand, ready to run. For the first time in her life, Lily smiled without trying to hide it. "Ready." Red emergency lights pulsed through the medical facility as Lily led Tom through the maze of corridors. Her perfect memory of the building's layout, drilled into her through years of training, was now their greatest advantage. "Security teams are gathering in the main halls," she whispered, pulling Tom into a narrow maintenance passage. "But there's a network of service tunnels that connect to the medicine production labs. We can use those to reach the roof." Tom nodded, pressing a hand against his still healing ribs. "Whatever happens, remember, your knowledge of their systems is our best weapon. You're not just a victim here, you're our way out." The words sparked something in Lily. She'd spent her whole life being told she was defective, weak. Now her flaws were becoming strengths. They reached a sealed door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Lily pressed her hand against the scanner, praying her access hadn't been revoked yet. The door slid open with a soft hiss. "Security alert," The facility's AI announced overhead. Unauthorized movement detected in Sector 7. All personnel initiate containment protocols. That's not good, Tom muttered as they hurried through the dark service tunnel. How much further to the roof? Before Lily could answer, footsteps echoed behind them. 3 security officers appeared, their stun weapons raised. Remain where you are, the lead officer commanded. The human specimen is to be contained. Apprentice Lily will proceed directly to reconditioning. Lily felt Tom tense beside her, ready to fight despite his injuries. But she had a better idea. Years of medical training hadn't just taught her about healing. She knew exactly how Ven bodies worked. The maintenance tunnel's atmospheric processors, she whispered to Tom. Cover your mouth. In one swift motion, she grabbed a medical capsule from her pocket and threw it at the tunnel's air filtration unit. The capsule burst, releasing a sedative gas specifically designed for Ven physiology. The security officers dropped like stones. Tom stared at her in amazement through his covered mouth. Remind me never to get on your bad side, he said with a grin. They continued upward through the tunnels, but their progress didn't go unnoticed. The facility's lights shifted to deep purple, maximum alert. All personnel. Reed's voice echoed through the speakers, somehow even colder than usual. The human specimen has compromised Apprentice Lily's emotional stability. They are to be considered dangerous and erratic. Lethal force is authorized. The final stretch to the roof required crossing an exposed walkway. As they ran, energy bolts from security weapons sizzled past them. Tom pushed Lily behind a ventilation unit just as a shot nearly hit her. The beacon, Tom said, pulling a small device from his medical gown. We just need 3 minutes for it to broadcast our location to the human fleet. Lily peered around their cover. More security teams were arriving. In moments, they'd be surrounded. Then she saw the medical gas tanks near the walkway's entrance. Another crazy idea formed in her mind. Keep broadcasting, she told Tom. I'll buy us time. Before he could protest, she darted out and ran toward the tanks. Security officers fired at her, but years of precise medical training made her movements swift and accurate. She grabbed a surgical laser from her pocket, the kind used for delicate operations. With perfect precision, she cut into the tank's safety valves. Pressurized gas burst out, creating a dense fog that filled the entire area. In the confusion, she ran back to Tom. Beacons sent, he said, but how are we going to? A bright light cut through the fog from above. The sound of engines filled the air as a sleek ship descended toward the roof. That's our ride, Tom said, laughing with relief, ready to see the stars. Lily looked back at the facility that had been her prison for so long. Through the fog, she could see Reed and the other officers emerging, their perfect order now in chaos. Yes, she said, feeling truly free for the first time in her life. I'm ready for everything. The rescue ship's interior was nothing like the sterile Ven facilities Lily had known all her life. Its walls were decorated with personal items, and the crew members displayed open emotions as they worked. She watched in fascination as they smiled, frowned, and even laughed while helping secure Tom's medical needs. Welcome aboard the Horizon, said Captain Blake, a tall human woman with graying hair and kind eyes. Tom's distress signal mentioned we'd be rescuing a friend. Though he failed to mention you were Ven. Lily's antenna drooped slightly. Is that a problem? Not at all, the captain smiled. But it might cause some diplomatic issues. The Ven High Council is already demanding your return. They're calling it a kidnapping. Through the ship's viewing window, Lily could see more vessels appearing in orbit around her homeworld. The sleek silver ships of the Ven fleet faced off against the more robust human vessels. They'll say I'm sick, Lily said quietly. That I need reconditioning to fix my emotional contamination. Tom, now properly bandaged and wearing a real uniform, joined them at the window. Tell her what you found in the facility's database, Captain. Captain Blake's expression grew serious. Our tech team accessed their records during the rescue. The reconditioning program isn't just emotional suppression. It's systematic brain modification. They've been using it to maintain control over their population for generations. By their own laws, it's a violation of basic rights. A communication alert chimed. The main screen showed Officer Reed's emotionless face. "Return the compromised subject immediately," he demanded. "Her condition requires immediate treatment." "Interesting choice of words," Captain Blake replied. "Because according to galactic law, forcing medical procedures on unwilling patients is considered assault, especially when those procedures involve mental modification." More human ships appeared, taking defensive positions around the horizon. Lily had never seen such a display of force. "The Venn hierarchy does not recognize your authority in this matter," Reed stated. "The subject is Venn property." "I am not property." Lily's voice surprised even herself with its strength. "I am a person. What you do to us, the suppression, the reconditioning, it's not treatment. It's control." The bridge crew turned to stare at her, and for once, Lily didn't try to hide her emotions. She let them see her anger, her fear, and her determination. Captain Blake nodded approvingly. "Well said. And as it happens, the Galactic Council takes a very dim view of societies that classify their citizens as property. Our fleet will remain here until this matter is properly investigated." Reed's image flickered as more Venn ships moved into position. "This will be considered an act of war." "No," Tom spoke up, standing beside Lily. "This is an act of humanity, something your society forgot about long ago." The tension in space continued to build, but then something unexpected happened. Other Venn ships began broadcasting signals, not to their command, but to the human fleet. "Captain," a communications officer called out, "we're receiving messages from multiple Venn vessels. They're crews. They're requesting asylum. They say they've been afraid to speak up until now." Lily felt tears in her eyes. Real tears, not hidden or suppressed, as she watched the Venn ships break formation. Decades of control were unraveling in minutes. Reed's image showed the first crack in his emotional control, a flash of fury before the screen went dark. "Well," Captain Blake said, turning to Lily with a warm smile, "it seems you've started quite a revolution without meaning to. The Galactic Council will want to hear your testimony about the reconditioning programs." "What will happen to my people?" Lily asked, watching more Venn ships approach the human fleet. "That's partly up to you," Tom said gently. "They'll need someone who understands both worlds to help them find balance." For the first time in her life, Lily felt not just emotion, but purpose. She had found not just freedom for herself, but maybe a way to help her entire species rediscover what they'd lost. Looking out at the stars, she realized this wasn't just an ending to her suffering. It was the beginning of something much bigger. 1 year had passed since the day Lily escaped the Venn Medical Institute. Now she stood at a podium in the newly established Galactic Cultural Exchange Center, facing a mixed audience of humans and Venn. The changes in her people were already visible. Some showed subtle smiles, others had relaxed postures, and a few even displayed decorated antennae. "Emotional freedom doesn't mean chaos," Lily explained to her audience. "It means understanding our feelings, not suppressing them. It means finding strength in our connections with others, not seeing them as weakness." In the front row, Tom sat with Captain Blake, both now working as diplomatic liaisons between Earth and the reformed Venn government. Tom caught her eye and gave her a thumbs up, a human gesture she'd grown quite fond of. The rehabilitation program she'd helped design was showing remarkable results. Former reconditioning facilities had been transformed into healing centers, where Venn could safely explore their emotions under the guidance of both human and recovered Venn counselors. "Today, we're opening the first joint human-Venn medical academy," she announced. "Here, we'll combine the precision of Venn medical science with the emotional intelligence that makes human healthcare so effective." After her speech, Lily walked through the academy's halls. Students of both species mingled freely, discussing everything from advanced surgical techniques to the importance of bedside manner. It was so different from her own training days. Remember when you couldn't even smile without getting a negative report? Tom asked, joining her on her walk. Now look at you, teaching others how to balance logic and emotion. Lily touched her antenna, which now bore a small decorative band, a personal choice that would have been unthinkable in the old Venn society. Some days I still can't believe how much has changed. They passed by a classroom where a former reconditioning officer, now reformed, was teaching a class on ethical medical practices. Through the window, Lily recognized him as one of Reed's former colleagues. "Have you heard any news about Reed?" she asked Tom. "Still under investigation by the Galactic Council," Tom replied. "But more importantly, many of his former patients are recovering well in the rehabilitation program." Their walk took them to the center's memorial wall, where images showed the history of the Venn Awakening, as it was now called. Lily saw herself there, standing with Tom on that rooftop a year ago, helping to spark a revolution. Dr. Lily, a young Venn student, approached them, her antenna showing the slight quiver of nervousness that would have once been forbidden. I wanted to thank you. My parent was in reconditioning when the changes began. Thanks to the rehabilitation program, they're themselves again. They can even laugh now." Lily felt warmth spread through her chest. Joy, she now knew to call it. "That's wonderful to hear. How are you finding your studies?" "Different than expected," the student admitted. "Learning to connect with patients emotionally is challenging, but it feels right." Later that evening, Lily stood on the center's observation deck, watching the 3 moons rise over her transformed homeworld. Tom joined her, carrying 2 cups of what he called hot chocolate, a human drink he'd insisted she try. "Thinking deep thoughts?" he asked, handing her a cup. "Just remembering that scared apprentice I used to be," she replied. "I never imagined I could help create such change." "That's the thing about emotions," Tom said. "They don't just make us feel. They make us brave enough to change things that need changing." Below them, the lights of the city twinkled. In parks and gathering places, Venn were learning to express themselves freely. Music, once considered unnecessary, now filled public spaces. Children played without constant correction of their emotional displays. "We still have so much work to do," Lily said, sipping the sweet drink. "But for the first time, I'm excited about the future." "Speaking of the future," Tom grinned, "wait until you see what Earth is like. The Diplomatic Council approved your visit request this morning." Lily's antenna perked up with pure joy, an emotion she now wore proudly. She had come so far from that suffering apprentice, and her journey was still just beginning. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, promising even more adventures ahead.